Hey, what's up, guys? This is Lucas Burnley. You are listening to the Edge and Flow podcast. I'm here with my co host, TJ Schwartz. And today, this is fun to say, we have a special guest, my good friend of the pod, and friend of TJ's as well, knife maker and entrepreneur, designer, Great Dane, Jens Anso.
Hey, everyone.
Good to have you, Jens.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this. What time is it there?
Been a long time fan of your podcast, listening since the start.
Well, thank you.
Thanks, man. This will be a fun one. Jens and I have been having the type of conversations that TJ and I have for, I don't know, the last decade and a half, probably.
Yeah, that's probably pretty accurate.
Something right in there. And I think the three of us put together are going to have a really interesting time, not trying to get too excited and talking over each other, mostly me, but
no, same here. Yeah. Jens, right before we jumped on, we were talking about like the difficulties of scaling manufacturing versus making custom one-off stuff.
Yeah.
You want to just dive right in, talk about that?
That's a whole different game. So I've been a professional maker for 23 years full time, and only recently, within the last year or so, started actually adding numbers to the game by introducing what I call shop built products, which is in-house built products made by my team. I run a small shop. I have 3 guys helping me out, running my machines, doing finishing work and stuff like that. And I've been doing that for a few years now, where they have mainly helped me build my custom folders and do accessories like carabiners and stuff like that. Now, last summer, we introduced a small fixed blade with the intention of it being made by my team. And that was my first introduction into higher numbers of a product where each part of the product, handle, scales, fittings, blade, sheath, should be interchangeable. And that's really the difference between what I consider a full custom project and a shop build project in my shop, is that the parts should be interchangeable. There should be no individual fittings of parts. So once you have to build not 5, 10 pieces, and you can individually fit the sheath or the screws or the handle, now you are having 100 or 200 pieces where you need to be able to keep a level of tolerances where you can interchange parts between them. And I'd like to say that every day is a new headache, or every day is a new learning curve, and we've learned so much over the past year. And I can tell you one thing, that switching from fixed blades to folders doesn't make it easier.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I've been trying to avoid the folder game.
Avoid it as long as possible. That's my advice.
I think there's a couple of things I want to dig into there. One, the distinction from having a team to help you build your custom work. Okay, that's one. 2, around folders specifically and TJ specifically, the idea that interests and what you like to make or like to design may be able to stay out of a production environment. Okay. Both of those are things that I'm kind of looking at and struggling with. So you said from the team element and production, like scaling, that has been inside of the last year. So your throwback, the small kind of sheep's foot blade, was that the first fixed blade? Okay.
Yeah.
So that was a shop built project. how long have you had the team or like multiple employees? Because that's been for a while now, yeah?
Yeah, so I hired the first guy to help me in my shop. He was a school kid. That's 6, 7 years ago. It was
Yeah.
one of my oldest son, Tays, one of his friends, was making knives, and he came by the shop and said, if you have any jobs that you'd like me to take care of, I could work a couple of hours for you, maybe learn a little on the way. And that was actually my first hire. And the second was a woman to help me doing office stuff and
Yeah.
and some shipping. Then 5 years ago, I hired the first guy to help me run the machines, um, which just hiring people is a whole different game as well.
Yeah.
The first guy I found turned out to be a fluke.
Yeah.
He was
How
fired
long did you
within
have him? How long did that take to figure out?
5 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, that's not bad.
Which included me being away on family vacation for 3 weeks.
I,
Oh,
I
geez.
So
remember that.
that was not an ideal situation.
Yeah.
But his substitute came in immediately after. There was like just a lucky punch. He just showed up and showed interest, and he was with me for 3 years, I think. Now we are a team of 3 guys in the shop and me, and that is 2 guys who are educated on CNC. One is a tool and die maker, and the other is a CNC technicians. But they're both capable of running the CNCs and do programming, do complex 3D drawings and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Fixturing,
Yeah,
especially with tool and die maker.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
and then he's actually a carpenter, but also a very proficient craftsman in his spare time doing Viking reenactment. So while he does the reenactment, he's a craftsman in that
Yeah.
period of time.
Mhm.
So he's just solid around hand tools.
Yeah.
And the combination of those 3 will do a number of different chores in the shop.
Mhm.
But it's been this evolving process along with growing the shop. Okay, in order for me to grow as a maker and a brand, I need a CNC machine. Okay, I have a CNC machine. In order for me to be more efficient, I need 2 CNC machines. Now I have 2 CNC machines that's hardly running because I need
Yeah.
to be everywhere else doing stuff. I hire a guy, he gets sick for 3 months. I'm suddenly very fragile. I need to hire a second guy
Yeah.
Mhm.
in order to not be fragile. So it is kind of a ever-growing organism to run a small shop like this.
Yeah.
That's for sure. No, one of the things I keyed on what you just said is the notion of, okay, so you're a custom maker or whatever it is, you buy your CNC mill. It seemed to me when I did that, the CNC mill doesn't immediately, it has the impact of being accurate in the way that it, drills holes, does perimeter chamfers and stuff, but you are still engaged with that machine. So the time savings isn't as large as what you might expect because you're programming, setting it up, flipping the parts. And there was occurrences to me where I was like, well, I could run these across, a horizontal belt about as fast without all the prep work. But where the actual rubber meets the road is you hire somebody and you put them in front of that CNC machine, they can get similar, if not identical results to what you were getting. Whereas if you get really
Exactly.
good at grinding bevels, grinding perimeters, and then you hire someone to replace you doing that, they will not be able to get identical results to you. So it's like the moment that the first person gets hired to be in front of the machine is the duplication or the augmentation moment. And it wasn't until I hired somebody that the CNC's impact really made sense. It was like, oh, he can in day one do what I was doing, which is crazy,
Yeah. Yeah. And when I bought the first machine, it was with a thought that if I can just make one more knife per month, it will pay for itself. And in the beginning, it was just a glorified bandsaw, really.
Yeah.
I was cutting profiles and drilling holes. That
Drilling
was
holes,
the only thing
just
that I was
making
doing in
parts.
the beginning.
Yeah.
Still to this day, I have decided that the parts that is put out for my custom work is not finished. I still go in and do a lot of chamfers by hand. I do a lot of surface grinding. I do edge grinding. I fit parts to each other. And that is really by choice. So that, and I believe that at the end it's mainly my satisfaction and belief in what product do I want to put out rather than the machine's capability, because the 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 chamfers that I put in by hand are not perfect. The chamfers that the machine will put out is closer to perfect if you look at it on a non if you look at it completely product to product and don't have any feelings involved.
Mm-hmm.
But I just like how a hand chamfered edge look like.
Agreed.
I think this is like actually a distinction in how CNC machines are used for production versus custom work. It's almost like a hand fit pistol or something like that, where you're taking the part set, but you're doing all of the hand fitting and you're making slight modifications that make it feel like a very human controlled product. This is something that I've struggled with, and I have the same interaction with certain tasks where I'm like, this is how I like to do it. This is enjoyable. I don't want to give this up. But and there's a balance point. I'm probably too heavy on that side right now without enough of kind of the true like precision repeatable automation. But you're one of the first people that I've heard like really explain it in a way of like, yeah, I'm taking the parts off the CNC, but I want to do these finishes and these processes by hand because it actually yields a different product.
Mm-hmm.
In my opinion, it gives you a more organic product.
Yeah, that's the word.
Once you have hand-eye coordination involved, and I don't think that the human eye enjoys perfection as much as it enjoys small imperfection that makes that one piece a little unique compared to the one next to it. I'm still working very hard by hand to make each process as precise as I can do it, but still I allow for the small human imperfections.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's the idea of like character. I always say umami. Like when I look at a product, I want that like extra flavor, right? I want something else in there, not just perfection, but something that is unique or makes it interesting. Character. And I mean, like wabi sabi to an extent, but we are dealing with a level of precision, even with the things that we are doing by hand.
For sure.
That I think it starts to push it away from like a concept of wabi sabi. Like we came from an era of knife making where we were making knives that were almost indistinguishable from another knife that we made by hand from a pattern with all hand controlled processes. I think that's really, that carries through, because you can do it by hand. Going from the machine, I think the tendency is like still is just to have that small shift. It's pretty interesting.
Also, I think it plays well into the concept of you put in 10,000 hours in a skill, and that's not until then are you proficient in doing that.
Yeah.
And we all hear put in well over that in what we do. Maybe not 10,000 hours at each little thing, but at least what we do. I had the less than pleasurable experience of handling one of my very early knives this past weekend at the New York Custom Show. I saw one of the very, very first sheepsfoot blades I put out there. It had to be from 2001 or 2.
Wow.
And while at a distance, the knife looked great, but handling was a whole different feeling than what I would expect from me today. So now that I've reached 10 or 20,000 hours in what I do, now I can actually say that, okay, I can actually do a chamfer and make it look good and feel good.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I have not gone as far into as you guys, not even close. I kind of jumped the gun and went straight into manufacturing. So I have full appreciation, having grown up in my dad's shop. That's what he's all about, leather worker and whatnot. But I kind of skipped over that. So I like hearing you guys talk about it. And sometimes it makes me want to go the other direction occasionally. But
well, I have to say one thing, TJ, and that is I have the utmost respect from your journey into the position that you're at here. And I joked about it with Luke the other day that you're so backwards compared to anybody else in this industry, in that we compare ourselves to knife makers in general, and most knife makers will make knives because that's what they like to do, and then maybe they will be approached by a production company that will like one of their designs, and then they will actually start considering themselves as a knife designer, and then maybe they will start and buying CNC machines and then go into production of some small kind. But as I understand it, you just went from knife designer into full production, and now maybe one day you'll consider just making a one-off knife by hand,
right,
which I find to be very backwards. But I have so much respect for that journey that
well,
and I'm overly impressed by it.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Especially since you were in a one-car garage up until recently.
I know. Yeah, we did the best we could in there. I did have a brief stint back in like 2016 where I made a few knives by hand, but it was like brief, like maybe 10 knives total.
Right.
I don't know. I think I'm wired in a different way than that. Maybe as I get older, that'll change. But I think when I was making them by hand, all I could think about was manufacturing, and it didn't feel like manufacturing to me. But I appreciate that. Thank you. It's great. But
I think it was needs based too. You knew that people made knives and made a living, right? Like by hand. You're seeing this, and you're operating in the world of design. So you're seeing production there, but you also you're in the valley, like you're near Chris Reeves, you're near Millet, and you're seeing Survive, and you're seeing these different components of production. And I think there's a point where you're kind of trying to get your foothold, where you're looking at it, and even if it's subconsciously, you're like, this is not the best use of my monetary earning time.
Well, so weird little side fact. The first folding knife that Millet ever made was the first knife I ever designed. And so right out of the gate, I was immediately looking at designing for CNC.
Yeah.
And by 2016, I'd already been doing that for like 3 or 4 years, designing knives directly to go to a CNC. And so I think it was like having started with that design mentality and then trying to go to a belt grinder. It was like I was going to have to undo everything that I'd learned in a way.
Yeah.
And it was like, I played with that. And then I kind of agreed to myself, I'm like, I'm going to go straight to a CNC when I get the opportunity, and just maybe I'll circle back to this later for fun. But it was like, I didn't feel like I wanted to change my design philosophy to do that. I don't know, but
that makes so much sense once you explain it like that, because for myself and I presume Luke, we had to learn how to build what we wanted to build now using a CNC.
Yeah.
And
I
that's just
I still don't think in terms of CNC. I'm getting better, and as I'm getting better with CAD, I'm learning. But I remember at a point, Jens, you had said something like, I'm now just seeing the CNC as like another tool in the shop, and I can like put something in it and go to drill a hole. For me, there's still kind of a layer of difficulty for me to go to this. It's either it take, figuring out a fixture or trying to do something. Like a lot of times it's so much easier for me to default to my hand skills. I haven't gotten that level of just like native language, basically, that I think you guys have kind of achieved. And it's just another tool in the shop, which is pretty cool,
I think one of the reasons why I consider the CNC just another tool in the shop, and have actually since the beginning, was also because, especially right when I got my first CNC, that was in 2009, I like to say, 10 maybe. And to my knowledge, there were only 6, 7 makers around our community that had CNCs. And already at that point, I could see some potential pitfalls that if you decided to use the CNC to make knives, you could either fall into the trap of making the knives the CNC would let you, or use the CNC to build the knives that you wanted and use it where it was able to help you, and then you had to figure out the rest by hand.
Yeah.
So before even getting a CNC, I was aware that for me, in order to fit into my way of thinking about a product, I needed it to look at it as just another tool.
Yeah. I think that especially, do you remember the conversation that we had about getting CNC machines when we were in Las Vegas?
Yes.
That was kind of the spark, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I think we had both been seeing it. But it was like this thing where it's like, we have to do this. Like, this is the next iteration of like knife making for us. You put your machine together. I think I maybe got mine in 2011 or 2012. So you were able to put it together first. The idea of, I don't even know if it tracks as much now as it would have then, but the idea that a lot of the knives that were coming off CNC machines at that point looked CNC'd, and it was because machinists were the ones that were buying their own CNCs.
Yeah.
And they were thinking like a machinist. And so what we would describe as a CNC or a machinist knife back then would be like all of the arcs and curves and everything are like very uniform, right? So a lot of them lacked like the organic nature, I think, of what we would consider like the handmade, like custom side.
Yeah.
It still exists, but I think it's less so now, right?
For sure. But now it has become just another language that a knife maker will learn.
Yeah.
Also, software has come a long way, and availability has come a long way. I think one of the reasons why I feel I succeeded in the transition from being strictly a maker using manual tools to becoming a maker who used CNC to aid whatever I was doing was also because of the software I was using. I went through design school using Rhino.
Yeah.
And I continue to use that to this day. I still use that to do some machining. We also switched to SolidWorks and Mastercam, but because Rhino 3D is such an intuitive, organic way of drawing, it just lent itself well, especially to the style of knives that I was making in the beginning of my CNC adventure. Back then, it was my very curvy period where everything looked like a weird bird or something.
Big radical, curves and angles.
And in order to make that, I actually think that CNC aided me into building these fancy shapes in a precise way, where once you start being very organic in behind the bandsaw and the belt grinder, then no two knives are the same. But I actually, because of my background in industrial design, I wanted to design it exact, but within these naturalistic shapes.
One of the things I've always thought about when I when I originally bought a CNC mill and was thinking about what to design for it is that, well, as you mentioned, if you're doing something by hand, like on a belt grinder, there's a certain flavor you can put into that knife, and there's certain things you can do that a CNC conceivably could never really do. You were talking about that like umami, that like human touch, the way the chamfers are, the imperfection that is like attractive and things like that. And I agree 100%. I think that creates a sense of beauty that's not achievable any other way. One thing I've thought though about CNCs is that CNCs have the ability to do a handful of things that are near impossible for the human hand. And so I've always thought, if I'm going to use a CNC, I'm going to lean into the strengths to do the things that are not replicable any other way. And CNCs aren't the only game in town, because there's other things like injection molding. Like if I was going to design a knife that was injection molded, you can do things that you couldn't do on a CNC mill. So it's like, whenever I think about how that thing's going to be made, I think about how can I stretch the boundary of the capability of that in a way that it stands alone, where it couldn't have been replicated using one of the other methods. And so whenever I design a knife for CNC, I do try to think about that, of like, how can I get this design into a corner where it couldn't have been done any other way? You know what I mean?
I like how you're able to describe a process that I kind of subconsciously have had since the beginning of using a CNC, but but also fairly observant of, for instance, the type of inlays that I've been doing for a number of years. It's something that can be done on manual machines. I used to have one of the largest pantograph mills that was available on the market. And with that tool, you could do exactly the same, just slower, and definitely 100% manned at all time. But I too looked at the possibilities rather than letting it dictate me.
I think that ties in, like for TJ, your concept of like reaching the edge, right? I think as just like a formative or like an ongoing practice. I mean, that ties right in there, right? Because you're looking for like the fringe of what a technology is capable of, right? Not having the work dictated by like the base level of a tool, but like, hey, how can I stretch that? Like, what can I do to make that interesting? Jens, I guess this is kind of tied in, right? Which the scaling concept, like I just watched your quick, like 1-minute tour of your shop today. And I love it so much. I mean, in my kind of perfect world, that is the ideal shop, which is you have production, right? You have a team, but you also have your own space, your shop. This is going to get messy because I'm pulling like 3 thoughts together. You were one of the first makers who I saw that really balanced a high level of like drive, creativity, and skill with like a really happy family life, right? Okay, so that's one. And through this process, you've seemed to be able to scale the production side, but still satisfy your creative and like craftsmanship desires on an individual level. Like, is that like how are you doing that? Because I watch a lot of people that don't. It's like you scale, and I mean, people just get super busy. They stop doing the other work. You're balancing a lot of things, and those are the things that I am kind of like struggling and prioritizing right now.
There's a lot of
I know.
things to address in that very open question you just
I know.
had
I
there.
know.
I can tell you one thing that it has been fundamental around doing what I do is, and that is I included my wife, Karina, in the company 5 years ago.
Yeah.
So really before I started the growth of establishing a team, building a larger workshop and all that, she was, and even before she was part of the company, she was very aware and supportive around my whole process before that as well. But 5 years ago, she quit her job as a teacher and started working in the company. And to begin with, it was mainly part-time. She was doing all the shipping, doing some of the bookkeeping. But what we did was, I have relatively small kids, not compared to you two guys, but my kids are 9 and 12. My two youngest are 9 and 12 now. And what our life change allowed us to do was keep a more balanced life in that, A, I would not work crazy hours. B, the shop is on our own property or the property next to us. And C, me working a little harder allowed my wife to pick up the kids from school earlier than what her previous job would allow.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a supporting wife is a huge benefit when you have a family.
Yeah.
And if what you're doing and trying to achieve actually supports a better balance, that helps a lot as well.
Let's stop on that one, because I think
Yeah.
this is a great question where you just the age of your kids is so different from where we're at. So, okay. Maddie has worked with me, I think, for 6 years. Same kind of role, right? Shipping, some customer service, but our kids are really small. So if there's a default to go to the kids, it's usually Maddie. Although we try to balance it and I try to kind of switch off, but if right now it's, for the most part, if business is busy, a lot of times it's my tasks that are like needing additional time. Okay.
Yeah.
TJ doesn't work with his wife, but they have a structure of him working, trying not to work too much. Kids are even younger than my kids. If you started to scale, was there like an age, of the kids when you started to see like a certain flexibility, or like, does it get,
Yeah.
you get more, is there more need as they've gotten older? Or, I don't know. I'm
He's
trying to figure
asking,
out a
does
better
this
way
get
to ask.
easier?
And I don't want to say that. Yeah.
Here's the thing, and just for your listeners, I have 4 kids, and my oldest is 27. The next is 24, and then 12 and 9. And I can only say one thing is, small kids, small problems. Bigger kids, bigger problems. Not quite so, but one thing that helps getting past 3 years of age is you get better sleep. That helps a lot.
Yeah.
But actually, what I experienced was that when my two youngest when Martin, he's 12 now, when he was 2 or 3 years old, my wife worked as a teacher, so she had to be in a classroom at 7:45.
Yeah.
Which meant that I spent all the time that I wanted or could with him, walking him to kindergarten. And on the way, we went through the CNC shop, and he turned on all the machines and
That's great.
pushed all the buttons.
I
So
love it.
that gave me so much quality time with him at a very young age. And now that they're in the school age, it's Karina who drives them to school every day. And then every Friday afternoon, I take time to pick them up together with Karina, and we go to a cafe. We just came back from the cafe right now before recording this. So I just think that whatever family situation you have, you need to adapt, and then remember that whatever time you're spending away from your family, that is something that you need to catch up on at some point if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you or have you struggled with the drive for craftsmanship or like research, design, like any of it in relation to time with family, right? Like, like obviously, like we're not, and I ask this because you're a very good father, right? You're very active, but I know how important your work is to you. Okay.
Yeah.
Has it ever created like an internal struggle for you where you are feeling like, okay, I'm spending the time that I want with my family, but I'm not able to give my work the time that it needs? Or have you balanced that somehow?
I think I've came to a conclusion that family requires time over me or my needs at a very early age. I became a father at the age of 24.
Yeah.
So, and I was in college at the time studying architecture and industrial design. So very early on, I think I adapted to the fact that, well, I can't go out drinking every time that I want with my friends. I can't do a study life sitting at my drawing table in the school at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
That doesn't function.
It didn't work.
Basically, all my classmates in college were spending something like 80 hours a week at school. So
you couldn't do that. That actually, as an origin story, that makes so much sense in a certain way, because you developed a skill set and a way of operating based on time demands at a very early age that probably has just carried. You're like, I need to do the things I want to do in an amount of time that fits the obligation. I had the exact opposite, right? I had no obligations and all of the time. And I think that also explains it. That's super. I never really knew that.
I do have to say that then becoming a full-time maker straight out of college, working 80 hours a week in the shop or more, didn't necessarily make me a good father back then. So I'm also grateful that I'm getting a second chance with the two youngest, and being more present in their life. So, but it even back when I was working insane hours in I like to call it my previous life, I was still available, being that my shop was at home.
Yeah. Huge.
So let me ask you this, Jens. I think we're all in similar waters here, because I'm totally relating to everything that's being said with the kids and stuff. And with mine being 2 and 4, it's interesting and tense sometimes with, work and how busy kids keep you, which is great. But as far as hobbies go, like where I'm at right now with the kids, where they're at in age is like, I have enough time to work and I have enough time to be with my kids and then extended family. And I find very little space outside of that. Do you have like a lot of hobbies, or have you been able to use work as the hobby? Like, is that functional?
Work is definitely the hobby as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have to invent new lines of interest so it doesn't become work.
Mm-hmm.
But in recent years, there has been a lot of talk about work-life balance. And I see it more as balance, because there's, when you are so involved in running a business that we are, and we are doing what we do because that is what we have to do. This is not something that we chose to do. This is because we are there. Let me rephrase that. There are so many more easier ways to make money than what we do. So if you're choosing the line of being a knife maker or knife manufacturer because of the monetary goals, that's definitely a wrong choice.
Mm-hmm.
I believe we do what we do because it's our passion. That's speaking for myself. I do what I do because I can't see myself doing anything else. And as of such, I try to find balance within that. And I live my life in that. Just imagine people stopping their workday at 5 and looking forward to Friday afternoon, because that's when they live your life. When I go on pension, I want to live the sweet life.
Mm-hmm.
I feel sad if I see myself in that situation, at least.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I try to
That's a
find
tricky
balance.
one,
I
yeah.
don't have many interests outside of what I do. I try to do something else. Like, I prioritize to go to the gym three times a week and spend an hour and a half in the gym each time. That is Jens time. That is time that I spend on me. I read a lot, and something like once a week I get to see 30 minutes of Netflix.
Mm-hmm. There you go.
That's
Do you ever go through do you go through burnout? Like, have you hit periods where you are just like completely overloaded, productivity drops, creativity drops? I don't know that I would associate with that with your personality, but I'm really curious.
um I'd like to say that I experience creative burnout,
Yeah.
in that there's periods of time where I have a harder time coming up with designs, for instance.
Yeah. Almost like, right. That's
So
like a writer's block kind of.
yeah, and I just feel, okay, this is definitely not working for me. And then sometimes I'm successful in just pushing through.
Yeah.
I have definitely had times in my professional life where I have felt a burnout being near, but more as stress symptoms.
Yeah.
And I have been very aware about reacting on that. So
Dig
that,
into that a little more, like as far as like reacting in what way?
so a very good example is that I'm one of the founding members of Giant Mouse, and trying to run two businesses at the same time
Yeah.
was creating a overload of capacity, and that forced me into just taking a step back from the managing part of that business, and reducing my role to strictly being a designer in Giant Mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
And that was a tough call, but it was a very much needed choice for me in order to keep reasonably sane and happy, really.
Mm-hmm.
What did that process look like for you time wise? Like, you start to feel stress around this additional, and it took you how long to kind of phase out of that role?
So the direct sign of stress was losing sleep.
Yeah.
So not being able to let go of worries and speculations and just, so my mind was basically just working 24/7, and that was a huge danger sign for me. And well, I guess it took about a year,
Yeah.
to both reach the realization that this is what's needed, until I was able to actually to do it in a good manner. But now and again, just running Anso of Denmark, I've seen signs of stress related symptoms that again the alarm bells go off.
Mm.
And one thing that has helped me a lot, and that was I took a period of time where I hired a coach to just simply help me. It was his official title was a workflow coach, but basically just talking through my challenges with somebody was extremely helpful. But also at the same time as he was guiding me and helping me, I did a lot of reading within workflow. And one thing, I think the thing that helped me the most was figuring out two things. And one of them was, regardless of how much you work, you will never get everything done. Regardless of how hard you work, you'll never get everything done. Once I realized that, that helped me tremendously. And the second one was that realizing that 10 or 20% of what you do is what gives the 80 to 90% result.
Pareto's law.
Yeah.
The
So
best.
once you start realizing what gives results, and I'm not talking necessarily about financial results, but which type of jobs or of the hundreds that you need to do gives you the most joy. Find those and focus on those.
Yeah.
Then the business will probably follow. And once I realized those two things, that has helped me a lot.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I still experience periods of time where I simply feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And it's often when things go a little sideways with production, for instance.
Yeah. Things stack.
A new problem will arise, and my planned day goes away, and suddenly I have to focus on something else. And once I can find back to my routines, that's what helps me a lot.
Yeah. The routines you mentioned, that's interesting for me, because I've found, I've gone through the ups and downs like what you described of the, feeling overwhelmed sometimes. And then, like you just said, being able to land back on a routine as quickly as possible and reestablishing a pattern and a flow is like brings the mind to ease very quickly. I think that was missing in what I was doing for a long time, is that I was just going to play whack-a-mole every day, all day, for however long it took. And like you said, eventually I'm eventually going to get it all done, which never happens. And eventually you feel like rationing the time spent and the effort invested on a day by day, hour by hour basis. And as long as you like keep taking the next step and then go home and then forget about it, next day, do the same steps, it's like it's a settlement for the mind, like a
and
refuge.
Just consistency and repetition. Like as I'm like dealing with like the, like ADHD stuff and like learning about it and trying to figure out how to like hack the ways that my brain doesn't work, and like the ways that it works really well, I've found that for me, the things that I can automate and make consistent are the things that are successful. And it's tricky in a way, because sometimes if I like what Jens said, if I lose a routine, like I will spiral And the only solution seems to be like stopping everything, going back to that basic routine.
Mm-hmm.
And like at this point, like things are set up with calendar reminders because I know that once I set a routine, I basically have 3 months before my brain tricks me out of it, or I just completely forget it, and I'll reset and like put things in. Um, Before I lose this thread, Jens, there's a two thoughts. Uh, One, I've been working with a coach, I think for like a year or so, right? And I really like him. Uh, I can't remember if these concepts came from him. One came from him, one came from an old therapist. One is uh, the idea of stopping a boat, which I feel like you being a Viking will like track. The
We
idea
just
that like,
burn them.
yeah, I that's a great idea if you could do it. But the it came into place for me where I was making like a change around stress, and my therapist was like, "Hey, it's like stopping a boat. You're not just going to stop it. It's like you stop it and then the weight comes behind and keeps pushing you forward." And so I've started to try to look at things kind of in the way of what you said, which is like when I start to feel those like red flags, not pushing past, because I realize like if I push past and that's when I fix it, I have to fix like a lot more coming up behind.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other concept was around the idea of balance, which I don't think that there's so much advice around work, finance, life that comes from traditional career paths that we have to parse it in a different way. And my coach had framed work-life balance for kind of what we do, almost more like being like a rancher, right? Where you're kind of just always working. You're on the ranch, you're with your family. Sometimes you're doing work that's profitable. Sometimes you're like fixing a gate. Sometimes you're, taking, cows somewhere. Like, but in that the balance exists. But it's not like, oh, I'm on, I'm off. Now I
Mm-hmm.
worked too much. Now I need a vacation. It's like all of it is just kind of nebulous. And that actually created a lot of space for me just to be like, just build a really good life that all the components are like in solution. And I liked
Mm-hmm.
that a lot.
No, I resonate a lot about building a good life,
Yeah.
because why do all this hard work
Yeah.
if not for a good life?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Well, and you said this isn't the way to pick like fast money, but this is I would say that all of us, like we're living very good lives and we are making good money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think around knife making specifically, I've always wanted to dispel this idea that like you have to be like a poor artist to like do this and you'll never make money. It's like, it's not right. Like
Mm.
you've proven that. TJ's proving that, I'm proving that, like we're proving that it's there. But there is a distinction from it just being like the easy path,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not an easy path, but a super valuable path. And that's probably, I mean, I would guess that's most small business create. I mean, if you were a carpenter or anything else kind of related with some creative component, it's not like the quick path to riches.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think one of the things that helps the balance with the family life is that the things that we do allow for travel,
Yeah.
and or just taking a Thursday off if it's needed in the family. And you
Right.
can't do that once you have a boss. Yes,
Mhm.
we
You
work
can do it maybe.
hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we work hard, we work long hours, but we have flexibility.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I just spent a week in New York, and we brought Karina and the kids, took them out of school for a week, and that kind of freedom is more difficult once you're in a quotation mark regular job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially with a partner that's
Yeah.
also Maddie and I realized that really early on where it's like, hey, I have this career, you're working in this like tech job. I'm going here. Like, if we work together, you can also go. Or like, if it's with the kids, everyone goes.
Yeah.
You just did New York. You were in New York for the New York show. Is this the first time the kids had been to New York, or had they been already?
And it's the first time Rosa Margaret has been to New York. It's actually Martin's third time in New York.
Yeah. You've done that with all the boys, right? Like taking them on trips to New
To
York.
New York, yes, but not to a knife show.
Is
So
this their first knife show?
This is their first knife show, yeah.
Did they enjoy it?
They enjoyed it so much.
Oh.
And I enjoyed that so much.
Yeah.
I had no idea. So in Denmark, you're taught English from the first grade. So we have a mandatory 9 years worth of getting taught English.
Yeah. And you don't have dubbed TV and films.
We don't have dubbed TV.
Which is huge.
So with Martin being 12, his English is fairly good. Rosa Margaret, she will understand some. Not her language is not amazing, and her age means that she doesn't just go out there and talk with people. But Martin did. So we arrived at the show a few hours early, and he started walking around the different booths. And I would have thought that after an hour or two, he would just be over, but he was so into it. So they all stayed there until 4 p.m. And I thought, okay, that has got to be enough for them. But Martin wanted to come all day on Saturday as well.
Wow.
He spent so much time walking around, asking permission to handle knives, and even some of the dealers with very expensive knives on the glass. He just asked, can I please handle that Michael Walker for 25K or 30K?
Wow.
And he was able to do that.
Yeah.
Because he was very courteous. Of course, I've taught him some manners prior to the show, but there were so many people who came up to us and just said, well, you have the greatest kids. They're so courteous, and they're so nice, and people were so nice with them. Specifically, Tom from Notorious EDC. I think he specifically enjoyed talking with Martin. So at some point he gave him a pouch and one of his knocks, and Martin got $50 so he could buy his own knife that he picked himself. And he walked around with this small EDC pouch and got like a 12 inches worth of stickers and
I love it, man. That's like such a
core memory. So much.
Yeah,
that's great.
That's amazing.
Actually, it was not Karina's first knife show, but the second knife show in the US, with Hawaii being the first. And that didn't really count, as she had to get her hair done.
Yeah,
one day show, and we got married right after the show, so she was in our room most of the time.
Oh, that was
sounds like
fun.
a great trip. Well, I want to touch on what you said about the traveling and the flexibility of being in business for yourself. One thing I've found is that it's one thing to build the business and the life that allows you the flexibility, but it is an entirely different thing to utilize that flexibility. Because it's like, I've found myself in a trap many times where I've spent all this energy building the flexibility into the system and trying to build in that autonomy, and then forgetting to use it. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's great that you're describing this moment where you bring your family to New York. And like you said, you have the autonomy, you're self-employed, it's a knife show, you can link it to what you're doing, and yet you're actually doing it as well. Because I think that's actually the chasm what a lot of people miss, is either they don't realize they have the flexibility that they really actually do, or they know they have it and they just are, putting it off, and then years go by and it's just all work, So I've been in that trap before.
I also think that it for me, it plays well into the fact that I get super inspired from traveling.
Yeah.
And I try, especially in the later years, every time that I go traveling, I try to spend time that I know will inspire me. So, for instance, good example was in October, I went to Blade Show West in Salt Lake City with Giant Mouse to man the booth, and then rented a car, drove 5 hours to Wyoming to visit a friend. From Wyoming, I drove 5 hours to Boise, Idaho, arrived at 2 a.m. at night because I'm a moron and decided to drive through the desert in the middle of the night. And then got to visit the Chris Reeve factory with Tim, and visited Bill Koenig, and then later on visited you, CJ.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to go out of my way in order to experience some things that I know will inspire me.
Yeah.
And of course, visiting an eye factory, visiting friends, super inspiring, but also just spending time in places that either I'm very familiar with or just by myself. Good example is Manhattan. This was a different trip, being that we were traveling as a family, but normally when I go to Manhattan, I will walk endless miles each day, just sucking in all the vibe from a major city like Manhattan. Or I will, when I was in Seattle and thought I would spend a couple of days in Seattle, and then I discovered that at least the part of town that I was staying in was horrible. So I went to the mountain instead and went hiking for a few days. So I try to do stuff like that. And that's something that will fuel the next 6 months being a hermit in my shop.
Mm-hmm.
That's active recovery right there, right? You're like filling the tanks. That is true downtime. You're the first maker that I really remember like doing something like what we call our Red X days, right? Like I remember for years and years, you always like, I'm going into Aarhus. I'm going to sit in a cafe. I'm going to take my sketchbook. I'm going to I have coffee at one point in the day and a beer at another point in the day. And this is just time. That process affected me so much. And having done that with you, right? Like being there and going and seeing and like having the conversations and just enjoying being in a new place. Somehow it's related to work because everything is, but it's in this really satisfying, peaceful way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the key element is getting out of reach.
Yeah.
Really.
Of everything.
Yeah.
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 I also realize, looking back, that that's something I had to learn, because do you remember our first collab when you flew over?
Yes.
We were working nonstop for 2 weeks, not leaving the shop more than once or twice.
24 knives in 12 days.
Holy
24
cow.
folders. 24 folders in 12 days. Free CNC.
Free CNC, yeah.
Beast.
Free CNC.
That was those knives. I don't see them pop up that much.
No, I think they are very much secured in safes all around the world.
Oh man. Did we do 3 collaborations over the years?
Yeah,
or 4?
3 projects.
3 projects.
Yeah.
We had, what was the first one called?
Sarah, I think.
Yeah. And then we had Zeta.
Yeah.
What was the other one?
Forget the last. But what we learned from project to project was do fewer and fewer knives and spend more time
enjoying hanging out.
Yeah.
I specifically remember one situation, and that was arriving to your shop for the first time and realizing you didn't have a dust system, and that freaked me out. So we spent the first day going to Home Depot and buying PVC pipes and then building a system, which incidentally was also the time where I left a paring knife in my knee.
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
He was doing something on the floor, stab. So both you and Jesper injured yourselves in my
Yeah.
shop at one point or another.
Jeez.
That
Yeah.
was,
That
oh
freaked me
man.
out just a little bit.
It's okay because that
More.
dust system caught on fire later.
Oh, geez.
The lesson here is not use PVC pipe
Yeah.
to make
Live
your
and learn.
dust system.
Live and learn.
Yeah. That's so cool hearing that. You guys hearing the backstory there.
There's a lot,
Yeah.
man. It is. It's funny talking about this just because there's so many years, and like just thinking about the New York show in general, that the New York show existed in like a period of time for like this core group of makers. It was really, really fun. It was great seeing you go back. I was having like major fear of missing it, just because I know it's so satisfying. Like do the show, catch the train into the city, eat, listen to music. Like it's a really special show. How overall was this the first year it was back?
No, it came back last year in February,
Okay.
and this year in late March,
Okay.
and next time is August in 25.
August. When we were
That
doing it, was it November?
that was November, which is, in my opinion, a perfect time in New York.
I really enjoy it.
February was kind of hit or miss.
Yeah.
Last year, when I did that, it was amazing. It was
Yeah.
a one-day show, and I spent a week in Manhattan,
Yeah.
just
Perfect.
walking around from bar to bar and restaurant to restaurant and coffee shop to coffee shop, sketching, taking pictures for 6 days after I have worked one day. That was perfect.
Yeah, that's the ideal.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
That's amazing.
This year was a 2-day show, and as I said, different because we brought the whole family. So the experience from that was just a different take on it. I didn't get as much time to do sketching and creative thoughts, but recouped in a whole different level.
Yeah.
But Manhattan has always been a favorite spot for me. So doing the New York show has been very dear to me. And I believe this was probably the 12th, 13th time I've done it. Not in a row, because there was a gap because of COVID, and then they moved it to, I forget where, different
Nashville
state.
or something
Nashville,
like that.
yeah. But I signed up for 25 again, so.
Yeah, good. I've been trying to get TJ to make one small show because I think that the experience and the relationships and stuff that and the time that you have at the smaller shows are so fun. And I think it makes you look at the work differently.
Mm-hmm.
And like right now you're focused on like kind of like the trade show level stuff, but I want to see you do like a one day, because I know you can do it and I know you'd enjoy it.
I do think that
That'd be
Blade
fun.
Show West kind of factors in that size of show. It's not
agreed.
that different from the New York show.
Yeah.
It's a little different in the companies who attend, but and the makers who attend, but the size of the show, the Blade Show West is a little larger, but not by a lot.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. Yeah, I need to. I'm speaking of like not using flexibility. I'm really enjoying the small kid life, and I'm also really excited for them to be old enough to go to the shows. It's like they're getting close, and hearing you talk about going to New York and taking the kids to the show, it's like Delta could go. Wilson's just a little bit out of the range right now, but then I just can't wait to do that.
The moment that their nose will get over the edge of the table, then they're old enough.
That's right. I like
Winston,
it.
we're taking Winston and Bo to Seaside for Billy Cho's show, Pacific Northwest Invitational. Bo was at Blade Show when he was baby. Babies are easy, and it's
I have
really
a picture
fun.
of that.
Yeah. Babies are fun, right? Like Winston is 4 now. That is terrifying to me.
Yeah.
Right. Because he just is so excited. Bo will be fine, but it's just going to be like, it doesn't matter though. I'm so excited. They're both really excited to go. And then we get a week in Seaside. Perfect. It's like, you just meet them at their level. You don't cut them loose. Like you,
Pretty.
you
I'm
get in there
so
in half an
bummed
hour.
about the timing of that show because that's right in our summer vacation, and it's
Yeah.
just a bad time for me to leave,
Yeah.
because that would definitely have been a show that I wanted to look into just because of the location. I
Yeah.
love Oregon.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it would, and I would make the argument at some point, like you can swap a little summer, because that is one where you could go and spend a week or, something out on another coast, still summer with 5 hours of show, but you're
Certainly,
still peak
certainly.
travel and everything. It's hard, man. We've talked about this a lot, but like there's so many shows right now
Yeah.
that it is really tricky to prioritize or to keep up. I think there's makers right now that like that their entire output is shows,
For
where
sure.
it's like you just go show to show to show.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know if that's valuable, not valuable. I guess I probably existed in that for a while, but
Didn't we
it,
all exist in
yeah,
that,
right.
more or less?
How like
Um,
peak, how many shows a year were you doing when that was
I
happening?
think at peak I was doing 4 or 5, which isn't all that much
Yeah.
compared to some US makers, but just remember that in order to do that, I had to
Yeah.
take a week out of
Transatlantic
the shop
flight.
Yeah.
every time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And deal with the jet lag and all that. But I was generally doing one European show and then 3 or 4 US shows. And I thrived in that and I loved it. And I
Yeah.
was looking forward to the next one. And as with anybody else, and frankly, I'm tired of just mentioning COVID.
Yeah.
That just changed my perspective so much. Also, because during COVID, I started my online knife show, Launch 15,
Yeah.
and I did that on a monthly basis, once a month in 18 months. And
Wow.
talk about getting close to burnout right there,
Mm.
because
Have you stopped that?
no, I haven't stopped it, but I changed it to be every 3 months.
Yeah. Good.
So
Quarterly.
now
That's
it's
great.
something I actually look forward to,
Yeah.
and I can focus on a ton of other stuff in between. But
Yeah.
doing preparation for a show once a month was just
Too
crazy.
much.
Yeah.
But it actually made a lot of sense when I initially started it. And it still makes sense, but in a smaller level. And I love doing it.
It's nice to have that kind of deadline with stress a little bit to kind of
Yeah,
push you. Do you find that?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've always found that preparation for a show is where I do some of my best work,
Yeah.
because you're under some kind of restraint in time wise. So, okay, you have to figure it out. Okay, I messed up this grind. Do I scrap that knife, or do I
Yeah.
become creative and do something else?
Yeah.
Or and I also put the bar up high, because I have a tendency to have higher goals than I'm able to meet, if that makes sense. So I put myself up. Okay, this was really fun to have an online knife show. Let's do that again soon.
Yeah.
And then 9 months passed, and then I remember.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So rather than putting it up now and again, I just decided, let's do it every month.
Yeah.
It's that automation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Structure in the chaos, like some
I
landmarks.
have to say, though, that from what I've been hearing from you, TJ, the kind of structure that you're putting into effect right now, without knowing it full well, is more than I would be able to handle. I need structure, but I also need a lot of freedom within the structure. So from what I've been hearing, you have structured, so you're putting together a week, and on Monday you do this, and on Tuesday you do that. I can't do that, knowing that
It's actually really
after
nice to hear, Jens.
Yeah.
I'm so happy.
That said, I'm a very structured within some things, or I put some things into structure, but in a much smaller scale. So I've learned that my mornings are super important. So the first thing I do, well, I get up, have breakfast with the kids. Around 8, I go into the shop, and that's when I look at my phone. Not before. I look at notifications from
That's great.
the very few apps that have notifications. I don't go on social media until 3 p.m.
Oh, that's smart.
Like, period.
That's
But
amazing. Yeah.
the first thing I do is I go to my studio. I put on a great record, easy listening music, Kwangbin or some Danish equivalent, and I take care of emails for 20 minutes. Because and it's actually kind of working against some of the advices that I've been given, in that you shouldn't handle email until once you've finished what's important for you. If you spend your time working towards somebody else's priorities, then you're not working for yourself. So a lot of advice has been given that you shouldn't open your emails until later in the day. But I found that emails are a huge stress factor for me, because I've been notorious for not answering emails for 4 weeks.
I think that's a prime example of advice that is made for a traditional day-to-day job, where you are sitting in front of a computer, your emails are open, you respond, they respond, your brain is attached to that thing. The difference is, a lot of times you're clearing out things that need done, and then you're getting up and leaving. And you're putting a timeline on it, which is saying, I'm giving myself 20 minutes to alleviate floating stress, but you're not waiting or noticing when someone's replying and automatically feeling like now you have to reply again.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah.
Because I also switch off automatic download of new emails. So I will handle whatever emails have coming in since yesterday's morning.
Oh,
Dude, that is amazing.
that's a hack. I like
Right
that.
I'm
there.
not saying that
Yeah. So you
that
go
I'm
in
not
automatic.
checking.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that I don't check emails throughout the day, because I
Sure.
do. But I don't normally react to any of it unless it's time sensitive,
Yeah.
until the next morning. But I generally I listen to vinyl, so I generally spend one side of an album checking emails, and then checking Trello. What's on my agenda for today? Um, we all use Trello by now, and the way I have it set up, I use it as a notebook. So the first page on my Trello is my brainstorm notebook. So every thought that I have throughout the day, I just jot it in to one section of
So you have
Trello.
a workspace that is just like a
I have
journal.
a workspace that is my day-to-day things that I need to attend to. But within that workspace, I'm spacing out what a card. I have a card that is just brainstorm.
Yeah.
Whatever thought pops into my mind, I put into that card, and then I do Trello housekeeping every morning.
I must say,
I sort out whatever thoughts came the last 24 hours.
I would love to see this. This is going to diverge a little bit. I want to talk about YouTube with you, but that is something that I would love to see from you, because you were the original person that brought Trello in. I've seen how effective it's been for you. TJ's using it in a way. I would love to see like a video on how you use Trello. and
That's
how you,
actually a great idea.
yeah,
I'm
because
gonna
I think
put that in my brainstorming section
good.
of Trello,
Yeah,
because
because a
that
lot of
is a
us
great idea.
struggle, I think, or at least I do, struggle with knowing how to set something up correctly. Um, which is that's fully an ADHD thing. So I get bogged down in the organization of a task to the point where sometimes I can't then do the task.
No, it makes sense.
It's really weird. So anytime I can find a tutorial of how someone is utilizing a tool, even if I veer off and modify, it gives me that like starting point of understanding that. So that would be a great one.
I don't know what works for others. I just found that this specific works really well for me. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons why Trello works so well for me is that it's so simple.
So simple.
It's cards, it's boards, it's workspaces.
Yeah.
If you can navigate through three things, you can use Trello.
Yeah.
And that has been such a game changer for me. I started using it 2022 in August 19th. And that's how important it has been for
Yeah.
me, that I recall when I introduced, and I took a Red X day and sat in a cafe and just filled all my notebooks into Trello.
Oh,
That's
wow.
awesome.
What did you, when you originally used it, did you find like online tutorials or did you just like wing it and come up with your own system
No,
from your
actually,
notebooks?
about 2 years ago, I hired a girl part-time to do some social media stuff for me.
Yeah.
So she arranged posts and helps keeping frequent posts planned in Instagram, for instance. So she comes in once a week and helps me do that in
Still?
collaboration with me still.
Yeah.
And when she first arrived here, she said, "Well, I use a program called Trello. Let me show you." Nope, please don't, because at that point I was using Slack, I was using emails, I was using way too many apps, and there was just way too much for me to comprehend, and I couldn't see the need for another one.
Yeah.
So she initially just briefly showed me and said, "Well, I'm definitely not ready for that." And then we circled back, touching up on it almost 6 months later, and the timing was right.
Yeah.
And she had worked with the same coach that I later worked with, who introduced her to Trello. And and she gave me a rundown of what she was taught. And then I took that information, and then the next day I went into the cafe and utilized the first rule of Trello, which is talk to everybody you know about Trello as much as possible.
There you go.
No, the first rule of using Trello was to find all your yellow notes and your notebooks and your notes on your phone and all of that, and just pour into one board.
Yeah. No, I
And then
must
use
say
that to organize.
Yeah.
Sorry, I
you
didn't mean to interrupt.
oh no, you're good. You came all the way from Denmark to my house just to show me Trello. You can tell me if
Yes.
that's the real reason you came.
Yeah, that was the
'Cause
real reason. Just spreading the gospel, right?
yeah, because I remember
Johnny Apple Trello.
sitting down in at our place and you showed it to me and I had the same reaction to you where we've all heard like people keep saying like here's a new app that I use for this and it's like yeah I've got too many and then you started showing me and I immediately gravitated to it because that wasn't long after I had hired Dalton and that was where the struggle was coming in for me and as you mentioned when you have an employee it's like you have to align what you're doing with what they're doing. And so that means you have to remember now what two people are doing and how it meshes. And that's where
Yeah.
it became a huge benefit. One thing I wanted to mention is you mentioned the structure. And I hope I didn't give the impression that I'm more structured than I really am, because I wanted to, I guess, say that a little more detail is like, I basically have like one chore per day on Tuesday through Thursday. that has to get done. That's my contribution to production. But everything else, it's probably like 6 or 7 hours a day is like pretty much available that I'm usually
Okay.
planning from like the day before.
That put my mind at ease, because
Yeah.
I was thinking that you're even more a robot than my initial
No.
I'm
impression
still
has
there.
been.
He didn't disprove his point. He's like, I'm so efficient that I have one task, and then these tasks become this. No. That doesn't make it better.
Just to finish my previous thought about first doing emails, then doing Trello housekeeping, getting track of the things that is important for me for that day.
Yeah.
Then I go and say good morning to the team, because I know
Amazing.
the moment that I open the door into the shop, things go sideways.
Mm-hmm.
I need to listen to whatever has gone wrong since yesterday. So generally, the team, they work different hours, but the first might show up at 6 and start working. The next might show up at 7. The next at 7:30. They basically run their own hours, and I show up at 8:30 after doing my things. So already then they're a few hours into the day, and I need to react to something. Other days I just, everything is good, and I go and do whatever I need to do. But and that might be from anything from, okay, we are out of whatever, or this machine is saying a funny noise, or we need to put a full stop on production because we have XYZ problems,
Mm-hmm.
or whatever.
Yeah. No, that's
So
it. That's an
so
excellent thought.
handling my priorities before dealing with others' priorities has been a key factor of just keeping relatively sane in this.
Yeah.
It's protecting your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting hearing, like, having you guys both sit here and talk. I realize that there's things that I do that are like these middle grounds, or where the focus is slightly shifted. So like TJ, I have focused a lot on hobbies and things outside of work. And I realize that I've built certain aspects of my business that are completely autonomous from me, that run. Now, I have frustration as a craftsperson because I want to be doing certain types of work that I don't always get to do. But I have created flexibility that I can apply in a lot of areas. So
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't really like looked at it in that way, right? Um, yeah, that's an interesting one. It's like, so there's some balance stuff. What Jens is talking about now from an employee standpoint and a time protection standpoint is really interesting. Two concepts specifically, which is like, I love that you're active with your team, but you're also not like super buddy with your team, which I think as soon as you're starting to get to a team is easier than working with one person, right? You work with one person in a shop long enough and it's like you're either friends or you don't like each other,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
right? So I think that has been a concern for me thinking about employees at this point and growing teams. But the time protection, that one seems like it relates directly to TJ. I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think I'm on a schedule right now that you used to do, which is I get up really early, I go to work, I then come back in and have breakfast or
Yeah.
make breakfast for my kids. So you used to do that, right?
I did that a lot. I would
Yeah.
go to the shop at 5
Yeah.
and then work for 2 hours and then go have breakfast with the family.
Yeah. So
And
that's what I
then,
do.
yeah. And I have still very fond memories of doing that. But I've also reached a point where if I don't get 8 hours of sleep every
Yeah.
night, I am fried the next day.
Yeah.
And I had a long period of time where if I didn't get into the shop at 5, I wouldn't get all the stuff that I needed doing done.
Yeah.
And I would probably work, I don't know, maybe 50 hours a week rather than 40 that I'm
Yeah.
doing now.
Yeah.
And I think that 40 is reasonable. 50 was fine, but more than that, and I still put in more than 40 hours a week. I still put in more than 40 hours per week because I will still do some design work or office work, or, well, like now, I'm not sure if you can consider this work, but it's still work
Yeah,
related.
it's still work related,
Yeah.
right?
And this is after hours. So I still put in a ton of time, and I love that.
Yeah.
But I also feel that at this point in my career, if I can't make ends meet with 40 hours in the shop,
Yeah.
then I'm doing something wrong.
I agree with that 100%. That's been what the lens I've tried to look through the family work balance for me is like, whatever our family needs, I need to get done in 40 hours as far as like meeting the financial needs of the family. And if I have to do 60 hours to meet our financial needs, either we're spending too much or I'm not working in the right way. Yeah.
That
especially
doesn't mean that I
now.
don't. Sorry.
Oh, no. I was just gonna say for TJ, like, especially now, I would say give yourself a little grace around that just because of unknowns. Like, if you ever find yourself like, oh man, I need to be doing this much work for this, it's like if it's a period of time, sometimes there's just more need,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But your baseline, I think, is like coming out of the gate, you're doing 410s, like you're giving yourself time to like be with family and like do things that are important outside of work. Right.
I think that the biggest problem is if you start prioritizing work over things that you do for you or your family that is important. For instance, I've been very much guilty of prioritizing working rather than working out.
Yeah.
Same.
So, okay, this week I simply can't stop at 4:30 to go to the gym.
Yeah.
I need to work. And I think it has become easier because I'm now planning my gym time around the kids' free time, not chores, free time sports.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Like extracurricular.
So I drive Martin to Boy Scouts, and while he's at Boy Scout, I'll go to the gym and I will pick him up.
Yeah.
So I need to get out the door at that point anyway.
Yeah.
But before actually structuring it like that, I might have gone to the gym at 8 in the morning. But it's very easy to neglect that in favor of work. And then you're neglecting what's important for you, because working in a knife shop, you've mentioned it before, it's hard on your body. Yeah. I'm not the youngest anymore. And if I don't go to the gym, I will feel it right away.
That's a distinction that you had said earlier, where I noticed the way that I categorize it is different. So you look at the gym right now, you look at it as like free time for you.
Yeah.
I look at gym as work. It is maintenance. It is maintenance on a critical piece of machinery for the business.
Yeah. Makes sense.
For me, as soon as I started looking at it in that way, there was a shift, because I don't enjoy the gym. I want to go to the gym. I want to work. I want to get stronger. I want to stay healthy, but it's not going to be the thing that I default to if I want free time. It's not therapy. Yeah. Like it's not surfing or going shooting or something like that, where I'm like, but I know I need to do it. And then relating it to kind of just a task for work really helped. This is an interesting thing about like being like self-employment. There's a few things. So one, all of us, we love what we do in a way that, like, the trap is that you can almost use it as just like default escapism from any problem in your life, which is why I think there are a lot of, like, in small industries like this, like marital problems and stuff like that, because people can just go hide in the shop and avoid everything.
Well, and it's a likely excuse. It's like,
I gotta go work. Yeah, exactly. It's a shield.
Yeah.
So honesty around that of like is one that I struggle with, where I'm like, what do I actually need to do? Do I need to be in the shop right now? Or like, do I need to go and do something with the family? And like, On weekends are a great example because I could just go on a Saturday and be in the shop and I'm really happy. It's not always, mostly not the best use of my time, you know?
One of the phrases my dad's said a lot of times, he says, is it important or just interesting? And so everything that comes up that you're like, oh, that's a distraction, is like, is it important or interesting? And it's like just using that as a filter, because interesting is not beneficial unless you've got some free time to pursue interesting. You know what I mean?
Though interesting can be beneficial if it supports your
Yes.
creative mind.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And
But that makes
that
it important.
ties in with your last episode of making what you find interesting rather than making what your what you think will sell well.
Will sell. Chasing the market. That's funny. Like thinking about TJ, like doing like the backwards business. Right when we got on, I was just thinking like there's a very real possibility that like as you grow this business and as you become more efficient, you actually do start to go backwards where you're like, I could easily see you with a cell in your shop where you're like, oh yeah, I want to like, there's knives that you can't build on a CNC. Like, do you want to go? Not really. Like, do you?
I know what you
your
mean.
aesthetics. Like,
Yeah.
do you want to go do something with stag and build some like traditional Western hunter and do leather work with your dad? And it's like, there's a point where you might just find that. And like, I love that because I think one of the goals that I've kind of seen come in over the last like 5 years for myself is like this idea of the business as support, where we feed our businesses. We may never get to a point where we can sell our businesses, although like I would say that at the point you guys are at, you have the potential someday to do that because you're going into production mindsets. But like the idea that your business now it's like a patron. It like can support you to be like, I want to do watercolors. Does it matter? Like, no. Jens and I talk about forging a lot. It's like, I don't care if I make any money with forging. I just want to be able to forge. My business is allowing me to forge things and not make money. That's amazing. Right. So I think it's like the old adage of like, does your money work as hard for you as you do for it? I feel like the business is like an extension of that if you have it. It's like, is your business caring for you and your spouse and your kids and your future and your community? And that's like a fun extension.
Yeah.
The end of my rant.
That's deep.
That's a good question to ask though.
Yeah. One thing that I've found over time that I needed was an outlet for my creative needs that was not driven by the monetary goal.
Yeah.
And I've tried different routes with it. I once went into an art supply store and bought something like $600 worth of paint, and it's still in a drawer. I just thought, well, maybe I should do some painting. That will be soothing, and drawing and stuff like that. What I found was that I combined some of my interest of tools and hand tools, and specifically by buying up old Danish hammers, restoring them, rehandling them in some cases, just a regular bench hammer. And then with the sole intention of giving them away to makers that I like and admire. And
that's amazing.
And there's really no reason why you haven't gotten one yet, TJ, but Lucas has. So you shouldn't put anything into that.
Oh, I can't wait.
Other than I haven't really had much time yet.
No,
but I've done it a handful of times. And that brings me so much joy. And it is a project that is quick enough that I can actually get something out of it in about an hour's worth of work. And I can use the tools that I use in my shop for something else than making money. And I love that.
That's great.
Well, you're making connections too, because like I've got that hammer on my bench. I use it. I think about you. And from the standpoint, like we were talking about like branding, marketing stuff earlier, totally unrelated. It's totally unrelated. And I understand that, but it can't help but have this effect of reaching past just what the knives that you are making to, or just the brand. Right now, I'm reading a book on Skagel, which I'm sure you have, Jens. And some of the most interesting things are like, how would you like to have a copper pot from Skagel?
Oh yeah.
Like, that's the stuff where you're like, it's amazing because it's real. It's like there's history there and it's different. I I look at very long timelines and I just think like, man, those in makers shops, that idea that you have of like, what is the phrase that you say? Like always given, never sold.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
You know, I put that phrase together partially because I was inspired by you, Luke, because I knew that if you ever made a project like that, you would make a phrase around it.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I love that so much. Thanks, man.
But it also, I think it builds on the personal brand level as well, because it tells whoever received this something about me.
Yeah.
That is saying something about my personality. And let's face it, what we are building are personal brands. Of course, we are building professional brands, but within the professional brands, we are so connected to it. And that goes in line with you saying that you can't sell the companies that we build because they're so tied up to us as individuals. I sent a hammer to Adam Savage because he's probably the maker outside of our community of making knives that I admired the most. I just see him as such an interesting individual, and he seems very kind and genuine. So I sent him a hammer, and I didn't expect anything from doing that other than I wanted to show him respect and tell him that I admire what you do. And then a few months later, I woke up and checked my messages, and I was getting emails, and later on text messages and personal messages on Instagram. Oh, we really love your hammer. I was like, what am I missing here? And Adam made a video solely about receiving that hammer.
I saw that.
That's amazing.
And I have to say that was one of my most enjoyable moments in my creative life, was just seeing his gratitude and how he understood the concept of never sold, always given.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I think that is something that really probably resonates with makers and creatives in general, because a lot of us have come from a place where we built something out of interest, had that thing become the thing that generated our income, and then have our relationship with that thing change in some way. And I think that for us, like balance in there really is like finding the excitement again and figuring out how to link that. It's like skipping a stone, right? Like you want it to keep skipping to the next, point. And sometimes it's just those little things, like you just make something and it's interesting. But I think what is fun about it is a lot of times it's not completely off the path. It serves a purpose, even if you didn't intend it to serve a purpose.
Sure.
Yeah.
And to me, it also served and serves a very deep meaning in that a bench hammer was the first tool I bought for my own money at the age of 15, which was incidentally also when I started making my first knives really, really long time ago. And that brand of hammer, I still have it and I still use it, is a DSI, Danish Steel Industry. And how cool is that for a brand name?
Yeah, that's fantastic.
It doesn't exist anymore, but the hammers do, and I buy them at flea markets. So it also ties up to my origin story in some way. And it creates a tremendous amount of joy for me to do that and actually having something to give to people.
Yeah.
That is not something that you can buy.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
I like that very much. It's got my gears turning big time.
Yeah,
Maybe
I would be
you'll get
curious to
one
see
day,
what you would
TJ.
do, TJ, like in a similar concept. It's like, what is that thing for you?
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. I
Right?
mean, yeah, no, that's the hammer is just a beautifully simple, universal. The universalness of it is what's amazing because it's like it's almost man's oldest tool. I mean, the knife might be the oldest, but the hammer might be older. I don't know. It's like hitting something, you know. So it's
They
so
go
We
pretty
have
well together for sure.
yeah.
we have a hammer that I think we found when we were living on Cape that was like in an old rusty toolbox, and it was Maddie's grandfather's hammer, and it's like a small claw hammer with an octagonal handle. The head is rusted, but in a really satisfying way where it's like polished rust, right? It's not, cancery looking. But what is interesting about it is that the handle has 20 colors of paint on it in this really organic way. But it was just that it had gotten painted over when they were doing projects and like splatters and grease. And one day I was looking at it, I was like, this isn't a working hammer. Like this to me is a piece of art
Mm-hmm.
because it's like a family story and like history in it. It's so
Yeah.
satisfying.
That's cool.
Is Danish still around?
No,
Okay.
they went out of business probably 30 years ago.
I would you see like sometimes like you like follow fashion enough that like you see rips, right? Like a logo done in the style of another logo. Like we're doing some stuff for Atlanta,
Yeah.
merch stuff that is like Atlanta specific rips. I would love to see an Anso DSI rip as a respect.
I love that. I love that
That'd be
idea.
cool. That'd be cool. I like it.
Here's an interesting nugget of information. My childhood home was built in an old blacksmith house.
Wow, really?
Wow.
My dad bought a piece of land, and on that piece of land used to have a blacksmith living there. So when he dug out the foundation for the house, so it's a part of the house was the old buildings and part of it was new. So when he dug out the foundation, he would find horseshoes and nails and stuff from back when it was a blacksmith. No hammers though.
See, that's one thing that I partially envy about like the European life you have over there is that out here in the Western United States, particularly in a place like Idaho, our history is like 70 years, you know?
I know.
Like if you find something that other than like Native American arrowheads, which are awesome, but I mean, as
That
far
is
as
awesome.
like metal objects, manufactured objects and stuff like that, it's like if you find something 100 years old, you're like pushing the envelope of some of the first people to be here. And that's cool to hear because, you know, I don't know how that blacksmith shop is, but I mean, there's layers of history right there.
Oh yeah, for sure. But add to that, so my grandparents all died when I was really, really young, but I had a spare grandmother, and she lived in a castle, which
That's
like
fantastic.
a full-blown European castle from 1100.
Oh,
Or at
wow.
least the foundation of that building was built in the 1100s. And
Yeah.
that was my summer vacations. I spent a lot of summer vacations
Wow.
in that castle,
Mm-hmm.
just roaming around and trying not to fall through the holes in the floors because it was really neglected when I was a kid. But
Wow.
This is
she
in
lived
Denmark?
there alone at that point
That's
in a
Wow.
full-blown castle.
What was was it a family home, or what
No,
was the
well,
backstory?
no, her husband and her and her husband bought it in the early 50s. When they moved to the area, it was put up for sale, and it was in very, very poor state because it had been used as a refugee camp for World War II
Wow.
refugees, and they had lived there. It was huge, like a 3-story, 4-story building in 3 lengths, if you will, like a horseshoe-shaped
Oh, geez.
kind of castle. And they have torn down the wallpaper to burn. They have burned all the doors. They have torn up the floors. It was in miserable state when they bought it. So they bought it at a reasonable low price and then worked the remaining of their life just putting it back in shape.
Jeez.
But it's still, the histories in that
Yeah.
that building was amazing.
That's fantastic.
But she lived there alone for I guess 20 years after her husband died, and she worked as a school teacher, and she supported that full building on a school teacher's salary. So it was
That's amazing.
possible.
The castle market has gone up a little bit since.
Yeah, it has
Yeah.
collapsed somewhat.
Yeah.
Have you been to Europe, TJ?
I haven't. I'm insane for having not been. I got to get
You,
there.
with your like love of history and specifically around like the wars, I mean, that would be an
Mhm.
obvious, seems like even
Yeah.
Iwa, like at a point, like doing Iwa. I mean, I highly, without inviting you to Yen's house, like I would say like going to see Yen's would be a very good
Yes.
idea. The other nice thing is you can do that and write the flights off and
Yeah.
write the stays off and
Yes,
take
of
your
course.
family and go to Copenhagen. And I mean,
Yes.
it's a
It
pretty good
will
plan.
happen.
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
one. I'm trying to make it back over. We've tried for years to get back over, but
Mhm.
hopefully we'll go see Jens.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I definitely, like you said, I read a lot about the historiography of the wars and stuff, but just like the whole European culture contrasted to not just American, but Western, like Intermountain Western culture. It's like, it's, I don't know, very interesting to me. I'd love to see it.
There's lots of interesting sites to be discovered, that's for sure.
Mhm. I believe it.
But just the sheer fact that every single house in the city that I live in now, well, not every single, let's say 75% of the houses in the small village that I live in is from late 1800s.
Yeah. When was your house built?
1894, I think.
Yeah, and it was a dairy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just like that, just that concept of repurposing and like seeing like the quality and the way that things were built and like slight differences. It was fun. It was fun living on the East Coast for a while because there's less of a gap between the way you might see a house built in Massachusetts from Europe than there is in Oregon from
Yeah.
England,
Yeah.
or Denmark or anywhere over there. Things like black slate roofs, like you
Yeah.
see that in
Brick,
Massachusetts,
masonry.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, just different, especially from
Yeah,
I mean
that's
New
interesting.
Mexico, but yeah, Massachusetts really reminded me of Europe in a lot of ways. Just even in like layouts of the streets,
Mm.
construction of towns, stuff like that. It's pretty
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Western US, it's almost like a different country. It's like a younger sibling to the Eastern US. It's yeah, it's interesting.
It's true. I wanted to ask about YouTube specifically. Like, social media right now, like Jens and I met originally through forums, right? So like we are of like the forum generation of knife makers, moved into Facebook, Instagram. You have a group on Facebook, but you're not as active as I am or was on Facebook probably, right? As
Yeah,
far as like group
yeah,
building.
that's
Social media, you have some help around Instagram now. You made a pretty hard push into YouTube, right?
yeah.
How has that worked? Like I'm just curious, like thoughts on it,
It's been
experience.
a ton of work and a lot of money. Like I decided that if I'm gonna do this, and I felt that I wanted to do it. I love telling stories,
Yeah.
and I find that the lack of attention span in social media doesn't facilitate that very well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I feel that what I have to say has a better audience on YouTube, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mm-hmm.
Or some of what I want to share has more need for time than social media
Right.
accepts. So I decided if I want to do this, I want to do it right. So I hired a small team. Basically, I hired one guy who's a cameraman and a producer, and he has a team working for him who do editing and stuff like that. So that of course comes with a price. But I decided if I want to do this, I want to do it right. And it first of all, I find it really, really fun. I
Mm-hmm.
really enjoy what we're doing and what we have done so far. And I feel that it is helping a lot with attention around the brand. And of course, end of the day, that is really, really important.
Yeah.
Um,
Not
but
monetized. So you're looking at this is as storytelling content. I mean, again, I feel I always marketing never really tracks with me because I look at things. I'm like, I'm interested. I want to do this. It turns into sales, but like I don't think about it like, oh, I'm creating an advertisement. But you haven't, or are you not planning, or are you planning on monetizing the YouTube channel in any way?
if I can, I
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
And I'm looking into it. It's really difficult to monetize directly off YouTube. You need
Yeah.
a lot of views in order to get to that. And and everybody has said, well, the first year, forget about it. The first year you're really only working with the algorithm here.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Right.
not until you've proven over a period of year that you are worth any attention from the algorithm.
Mm-hmm.
So the first year, it takes a lot of time and
Yeah.
energy just working on that. We just reached that point, and I can see almost to the date a change in view numbers.
Really.
It's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's still not impressive if you look at it compared to Instagram, for instance, where on
Sure.
Instagram I will get maybe 10,000 views on a reel, or when it's crazy, 35 or 50 or
Yeah.
75,000 views on a
Mm-hmm.
reel. And I don't get that kind of traction on YouTube, at least not yet. On Instagram, I have 54,000 followers. On YouTube, I have 1,600
Yeah.
subscribers. So the numbers don't compare well, but the way I look at it, if I have 1,600 people who are willing to sit down and watch a 30-minute episode,
Yeah.
Yeah. It's about
or
quality.
500 or
Yeah.
300,
Yeah.
Yeah.
those people have shown enough interest in the brand that if they didn't know it beforehand, they would probably have an interest in learning more. So I have changed my view at looking at YouTube after a while, learning that a slow growing platform is actually not a bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
I think slow growth is actually more beneficial a lot of times because it is robust. If it's grown slowly, I think it has the room to like develop like resiliency, and I think it's a truer support. It's like a not a great way to explain that,
Well, it
but
makes perfect sense.
yeah, the
And
value. I mean, you don't.
I
Go
think
ahead.
you can compare it to our careers in knife
Yeah.
making. We have shown persistence,
Yeah.
and we continue, at least I hope, to be relevant. We continue to be relevant, whereas we have been in this game long enough that both you and I have seen people rise and fall from fame.
Yeah.
And the slow growth is much better than instant success, and then a year later nobody knows who you are.
Yeah. That's for
Man,
certain.
that's the truth. I'm gonna throw it out here. We don't have to. I feel like that's actually a really good place to wrap if we're happy with the amount of time. Man, yeah, that's a good thing to keep in context.
Staying power.
Staying power. Yep. Build it slow.
Hey,
It's
thank you
been
so
a
much.
pleasure, guys. I've been looking forward to being on your show, and you didn't well, my English is really going out the window now anyway.
We've used all your words.
Well, I hope you're trying to say we didn't disappoint.
Yeah.
You didn't disappoint. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, I hope that's what you're saying. Good.
I'm a little tired. It's 6 p.m. and I haven't had dinner yet.
Yeah, you
Go
better
eat,
go
man.
get
That
some
was
dinner.
thank you for sitting with us, man. That's so enjoyable. I can't wait till we can do it again in
I
person.
know.
Yeah, I look forward to that in October.
This
October.
was relaxing. I tell you what, this was a nice way to start the day and end the day for you. But I hope people listening, I hope you were as interested and intrigued as I was, because that was good.
Where can people find you, Jens?
I have my website at ansoofdenmark.com. Just search Jens Anso and you'll find me. I'm pretty active on Instagram as well, Facebook, and YouTube. Search Jens Anso on YouTube and my account will pop up.
Some great videos, guys. The YouTube channel is awesome.
Really, really
definitely
clean.
worth a deep dive.
Yeah. Jens with a
Thank
J.
you so much.
That's right. Thanks, guys. All right.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you
Peace.
guys around.